Not making a decision is a decision in itself. I have enough information to feel comfortable making this decision, and I'm just going to roll with it and accept the risk. I'm investing in knowledge, access, and a community that would be able to support me. You have to show up and you have to engage. You have to.
Welcome back, investor. We've got a treat for you today on Passive Income Adventures. We've got Lehua Griffith. She is a passive investor who does some active, some passive, some work, and she's going to tell us about how she is able to make the decisions about when she's going to manage something herself, when she's going to do something passive, does she need to be working or retiring early, all of those kinds of things that most of you are really concerned with. Her story really highlights like some of the things that we all go through. And she's not here to promote any particular thing. Sometimes podcast could be, even mine, can be a little bit of a puff piece for somebody trying to promote themselves or their business, or they're raising money or they're wanting to sell a program or something. And so I like that we can just get a little deeper and go beyond that in a conversational format where we can just talk about financial freedom, working for fulfillment versus working for money, and all of those kinds of issues. So, Lahua, thank you for joining us today and talking about all of these things that we're all thinking about, but so few people are actually talking about.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Emma.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, where are you from and what is your real estate or your investing background? What's your day job? All of that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. So I am born and raised on Oahu, which is the main island in the Hawaii chain. Local girl, just had the idea that I had to work full time and save my money, build my portfolio, and one day I'd be able to retire here at home and just enjoy the good life. Started working when I was about 15 years old, ended up joining the Air National Guard. So I do have a military background. I'm an Air Force vet and slowly built that residential portfolio prior to me getting married. Once I got married, was able to scale that portfolio a little bigger and got 4 properties here on Oahu, and realized after that whole time frame taking about 10 years total that the dream, the thought of I'm going to get all these rentals, I'm going to have this mailbox money and this passive income just rolling into my bank account, and that's what's gonna let me retire, didn't look like it was gonna happen. Just because the market here is really expensive, the prices of houses, the amount of money you have to put down. And with that traditional thought process, you think I have to save, put down a down payment, get a good mortgage that would be able to be covered by a renter. And realized when we purchased the 4th property that we had to put 50% down in order to get a mortgage that would be covered by a renter. And
Okay.
then, just with all the craziness that was going on with the Maui wildfires, the Florida condo collapsing, and just all of these world tragedies, the opportunity just seemed to shrink even more because now the HOAs, the homeowners associations, were saying, hey, we have to do special assessments. The insurance companies were coming in and saying, hey, we got to raise your insurance price. So that the passive income that we were making, it just slowly continued to shrink. And for a couple of my properties, we were actually in the negative every month because
Mm,
of those things. So recognize that I have to do something different. And what is it that I can do that will be able to move me forward? So I started down the path of becoming a real estate agent, got about halfway through the program and talked to a few people because you meet people and you start asking them, like, hey, are you a real estate agent? How many hours do you work? What do you do? How easy is it to get potential homes to list or buy or whatever the case is? And just realized that probably wasn't what I was trying to move forward with. I wasn't trying to replace my W 2 job with another job. I was
yeah.
looking for something that was going to provide that passive income. So I did decide to enter into my own investment phase, and I invested in myself and became a part of a few mentorship programs. One is the Hui Mastermind that Sasha
Mhm.
Smith and her partner Fuzzy Jardine had set up here locally. And that program allowed me to really understand all the different opportunities that were out there, not just fix and flips, but new builds, wholesaling opportunities, tax liens and deeds. Like it was just completely mind blowing. Because when you're walking into something and you have no clue even which direction to start in, you have this group, this mentorship that says, here's all your options, here's how you get started. And That was very eye-opening in the very beginning.
Yeah, and I think that's how we met. You met Zasha and then my partner Harmony in Hawaii at an event and ended up investing some money with our fund for the private lending in Utah. I don't want to spend too much time dwelling on that as far as that goes, but I feel like it's important to point out like you were doing some active things, but when you invest in a fund like ours, you're like 100% passive. There's no voting. It's just trusting somebody else to handle your money well, and so you're diversified because you're in Salt Lake City investing there versus having everything in Hawaii. So that does help. Is that explain to me the thought process you went through as you're being exposed to more and more ideas? A lot of them are very active. You got to the tax liens and all that is just a way to go get a cheaper house than you're able to buy on the market. And so your margins might be better, but still a rental house that you run. So walk us through the thought process of how you made the decision to invest very passively and how that kind of fit into your overall plan that you were working at that time.
So the passive investing piece is very important because multiple streams of income is the goal. So my
Mhm,
husband and I had investments in stocks, both of us, because we work for the federal government. We have our thrift savings plan. So we're putting money into that. And these are all methods that will provide passive income down the road that we'll be able to tap into. And it, just as you said, we don't have to do anything. We don't have
mhm,
to vote. We don't have to search for the properties. We don't have to work with the realtors. We don't have to do anything. And that's the beauty of it. So we set aside some funding to be able to do that. And through Rise Capital, I've been able to participate in, I'm on my third
mhm,
investment with the company, and I'm excited. It's simple conversations, simple transaction just to get the money moved over. And then when a new opportunity comes up or when one closes and it's time to move into another one, it's very easy for me to go, oh, sure. Yep. That sounds good. I do a quick review and I'm like, soft commit
mhm.
and just move forward from there.
Yeah, it's a and we try to make it as easy as possible. Maybe we can talk about that more at the end, like some of the things that we can improve in our process. Because I think that a lot of people, when they get involved in their first passive investment, there's just a lot to learn, a lot of paperwork. Because when you're raising
Yes.
capital, there are a lot of regulations to raise it legally. So there's a lot of paperwork to read and all of that. Was that your first totally passive limited partner investment with Rise?
Yes, that
Okay.
was.
Okay. So when you first got like that paperwork in your inbox and there's all these disclosures about all the things that could possibly go wrong, like the risk outlines that we're required by the SEC to provide every investor to read through and say, do I really want to do this? What were your feelings during that one from the risk factor, but also two, just from the time factor of like, I gotta read all this? Walk me through that mindset that you had.
And anything that you invest in is a risk. And I think for things that we are automatically signed up for, like the thrift savings plan, the federal retirement program, they have all the same paperwork and verbiage and things that you should read through. But I think we all just go accept and move on. So we don't think too hard about, okay, do I have reading through it and asking all the questions? So in this regard, because it is a newer investment option, I did read through all the paperwork. I did ask Harmony a number of different
Mhm.
questions. And just because I stepping into something new, it's outside of what people are familiar with, what they're comfortable with. And I think there's an idea that we just hit accept when we go with a larger company that says, "Sure, I'll take your money and then I'll invest it in a bunch of different things and you'll make this type of return." In this case, I sat down, I read through it because I'm committed. This is my future. And I just wanted to make sure that I understood it fully as well, because that's part of it for me personally. I want to know. I want to know what it means, what the terms are, what the options are, what the opportunities could be. Can I transition or pivot halfway through? And just for me, it's really important for me to understand what that all entails. But I know for others, it's they even take a more passive stance and say, here you go, you figure it out. So
Yeah.
I just set aside the time, read through it, wrote down my questions, put together an email, had a follow up call with Harmony, and decided to move forward.
Yeah, it's interesting you gave that spectrum there. Like some people are like, I'm just gonna hit accept on the paperwork. Yeah, whatever. Here, take my money, put it in something that you think is good. I trust you. All the way to the other side where somebody gets that paperwork and they're frozen. They're like, wait a second, I have to read every word. sending it to their managers or their financial advisors, things like that, which I think is a great idea. Read every word and send it to your advisors. But then they're coming back and they can never really pull the trigger. And so I think that somewhere between those two extremes on each side of this, you seem like you've fallen into the be informed, don't just throw your money in, set and forget it, whatever you guys think is best. Because each deal that we send out is an individual deal that you have to sign a new little document of disclosure of risks and details and all that kind of stuff. As I feel like that's the ideal kind of investor who can go in with eyes open, fully informed, but yet still ready to make a decision. Is that just how you naturally are? Did you have to develop that trait? And if somebody doesn't already have that, what kinds of things can they do to feel more comfortable making high ticket decisions like this?
So somebody told me once that not making a decision is a decision in itself.
Um,
And I really think about that a lot because you have to make decisions. You make decisions every single day, all day long, whether you realize it or not. On the smallest things, you have to make a decision on what you're going to wear, what you're going to eat, what you're going to do after dinner. These are all little decisions that you make regularly. In my previous position, I was a supervisor and I had a team of 13 team members that I had to manage. Our customer, 6,000 plus employees, that's a lot of actions moving all at the same time. So for myself, it was very important that I came to a conclusion and made a decision with all the information that I had, understanding that things can go wrong. There could be a mistake made. We may not be completely informed. We might have missed something, but that's just part of it. You still have to make a decision, and you're never gonna feel like you're fully informed. There's always more questions. That's that rabbit hole. You start
mm,
asking a question, it leads to something else. And there's so many what ifs that you really have to get to a point where you say, I have enough information to feel comfortable making this decision, and I'm just going to roll with it and accept the risk because investing is risky. Everything you do is risky. So you really just have to bite the bullet and just make the decision and move forward. And if it, most of the times it works out great, sometimes it doesn't. I have made a few bad investments that we regret, but now I feel a little more comfortable asking more questions, being more open to opportunity, and feeling more comfortable moving forward with the information that's presented.
okay, this reminds me of that Colin Powell, the famous quote, the 70-40 rule. The
Mhm.
military, you probably heard of this one. Can you just describe for the listener like what that 70-40 rule is?
I wish I had it in front of me so I could read it verbatim,
I
but
I got you off guard there.
my biggest takeaway from that is you can have so much information, but it's still not going to be enough. And you
Mm,
really need to weigh what you have and feel comfortable moving forward. So, in the long run, you just need to make a decision
yeah.
regardless of what it is, and know that there's options to pivot halfway through or at the 70% point if you need to. But just overall, if you have enough to feel comfortable, go for it.
Yeah, I think the military tends to have an attitude of get as much information as you can, and then you have to make a risk-filled decision with understanding you don't know it all. Like, once more than 40% of the information, but less than 70, because if you waste time on more than 70%, you're just gonna waste time. In the military, you have to make decisions really quickly, and you have a lot more on the table when you're talking about soldier lives and civilian lives and things
Right.
like this, and so you have to make big decisions knowing that you don't have all the information. Has that impacted your ability to make decisions?
I think I've done a pretty good job at feeling comfortable with whatever decision I'm going to move forward with. My husband is definitely a lot more conservative in
Mhm.
his thought process. He's very traditional as well in the investing side of the house. So it did take a little bit for me to convince him in some regard for certain things. But I'm also glad to have him because I would say that I'm very risky in that mindset
Mm.
where I'm like, let's go, let's do this. We will figure it out. And just having the attitude of, we'll figure it out. If things don't work out, we'll figure it out.
Yep.
What's the worst that could happen? And for my husband, he's in his position, he also needs to make big decisions. He's in charge of a lot of funding and he gathers as much information as he can. He has all the right people feeding him what he needs to know in order to do that. So for myself, I too need to be educated in whatever it is that we're moving forward into so I can present it to him and let him know here's what I want to do. Here's the direction it's going to go in. Here's what it's going to do for our portfolio overall. And to date, I've been pretty successful in getting him to approve, if you will, with the investments that we've made.
Yeah, that's a fascinating topic right there because I feel like people will ask me sometimes, like, how did you convince your husband to go along with private markets, alternative investments? It still seems crazy. I don't actually understand why, because it's huge market, real world assets, houses, things like that. To me, it's like you're not very diversified if you're only in public markets because those are all paper assets. Even REITs are essentially paper assets because you own stocks in a company that owns real estate, not the real estate itself. So like, how'd you convince your husband to go along with this? And I'm like, I can't give any good advice on how to do it because he wanted to not have to make the decision. And so he basically just earmarked some money to say, okay, here's what we have here. Here's what we need to live on. And let's just keep them very separate. And then you go have a ball, you learn, lose money, whatever. And he was super chill about it. So I don't feel like I had to convince him. So I'm not a very good person to ask that question to, but did you do something similar or was it more of a logical, hey, no, these things are actually real world assets? Or what did that process look like for you?
So I've got a great story
Yeah.
to sum that up. We had gone to a financial strategy meeting, or myself. It was actually introduced to me by a coworker. And she said, you need to go do this. You need to get a HELOC and just flip your mortgage. And it's just going to make all the difference in the world in your financial portfolio.
Mhm.
So for me, I'm like, I'm in
Yeah,
because
sign me
if
up.
you, yeah, sign me up.
Did the same
I'm
thing.
yeah, because credit card hacking was something that I did
Mm,
prior to meeting my husband. I was a single mom for almost 10 years.
mm,
So I had to make it work. I had to figure it out. And one of the things that I did, if I needed a new set of tires on my car, I would credit card hack. So
yep.
just 0% balance transfer, 0% for 12 months, and I was able to survive. And in that time frame, I was able to buy a townhouse by myself. I was in the military, so I did have the option of the VA loan, which
Mhm,
worked out. But just in general, that was my things that I had done in the past. So fast forward to going to this banking financial strategy seminar, and they were talking about HELOCs, and I thought, oh my God, this is great. We need to do this. And my husband needs to come. We need to sign up and let's get started. So he was very against the idea, did not want to go. And it was a struggle. And I finally told him, I said, I'm going to go. I'm going to go meet one on one with the advisor. You can come if you want to, but here's the date and time, and we'll see where it goes. And he was so against it. It was hilarious because he was sitting at the table. The advisor was on the other side of the table, and he's literally, I have to turn because he's like sitting there with his arms crossed looking at the guy over his shoulder and just giving him this like head nod. Yeah, yeah, okay, yeah. What can you teach me that I don't already know? And by the time we were done, he was turned around, fully engaged, and just tell me more. Where do we sign up? What do we do? And that was like the biggest transition that I had
mm,
seen because I had walked into this meeting thinking, okay, if he's not going to do it with me to do a HELOC, I'm going to do a PLOC. I'm going to pay off my car. Like I'm going to proof of concept. I'm going to do
yes.
it myself and I'm going to show him how great this is. And I didn't even need to do that because when we walked out of there, he was like, yep, we're doing this. This is great. He was a little worried about the 2 years or the 3 years, whatever it was for the introductory HELOC rate, but it's been almost 10 years now, and we actually have a couple of HELOCs, and we just figure it out.
Yeah, that is a great story. So I think if you took the educational side, because a lot of what I do with my husband is I'll be reading something and I'll say, hey, honey, little snippet of education here. And so he's getting it in these little bite sized pieces. I never say, will you please read this book? I would bring him to social events and I would joke. Sometimes I'd come across him, like we'd be separated, right? And I'd come back over to where he was and I would over him telling people things about real estate investing. And I'm like, oh, all those restaurant meetings where he just showed up for the chips and salsa. He's actually listening and learning, and
Right.
I hear him telling these things to people about stuff that we've been doing, and he's explaining it to them correctly, and I think those little bite-sized snippets of education without any pressure, "Please read this book, like, our lives will be
Right.
changed if only you'd let me." And I think that also you seem to be demonstrating an attitude of nobody needs to let you. There's a joint decision making that couples go through, but at the same time that there is some separation. Like, we're both individual humans. You were gonna go get a PLOC instead of a HELOC and just see if it worked, and you have some independence and autonomy. I guess what I'm trying to say is your partner doesn't always have to rubber stamp everything that we do. That's a
Right.
really tricky balance to strike, and I think what made me feel comfortable of making decisions without him was that separation of this money is business money and this money is personal money, and as long as you stay within that budget, then everything's gonna be fine. He didn't care if I lost every dime of it, and so it gave me a lot of freedom to experiment, and the pressure was on me to show, like, "Yeah, I can do
Right.
this," if we wanted to increase that budget. So, yeah, great story, and I think every marriage is a little different, right? But hopefully between the different perspectives, the listener can be like, "Oh, I could try a little of this, a little of that, and see where it comes in." Alright, so you said a couple of things that I really want to make sure we explore fully. You mentioned at the beginning how you're investing in yourself by your own education, and this is something I think a lot of passive investors don't want to do because they want a set it and forget it, easy as the stock market. There's a reason public markets are so easy, right? And private markets take a little bit more commitment to education and then paperwork and a little bit of portfolio management from that side. I am always like, passive investors should be signing up for the same kinds of things that active investors are doing because at the very basic levels of learning how to run numbers, how to spot a deal, all that, that's all the same, whether you're going to be active or passive. And once you decide you want to be active, there are whole other layers on top of that for the details. So it's always that. But the passive investor really needs to be at least at those fundamental levels of education and spending that time to do it. Can you explain to me why you decided to invest in yourself? Was it at the beginning you're like, I still have to be an active investor. I still have to own my properties and you didn't know passive investing was a thing? Or was it like, no, I need to learn some things so I can make smart decisions? Or how did that evolve?
So that's really what it was. I needed to feel more confident in
Mhm.
what other options were out there. Being in Hawaii, I think, is just in itself because of the market. What's the fastest way that I could bring more capital into my bank account and
Mhm.
then walk away from my job and just trying to understand all the different facets of it? I could have spent hours on YouTube and going to different websites and just Googling things and trying to understand from other people. I was listening to audiobooks on different investment strategies and just wanted to get a better idea of people that were successful here. So that's when I found the Hui Mastermind, and that was really that eye opening opportunity. And looking at the amount to invest in that program, at the time, you think, oh my gosh, that's a lot of money. But at the same time, what am I paying for? I'm paying for their experience, I'm paying for their knowledge, I'm paying for access to those that have already been through it and have done all the struggles. If they tripped and fell 100 times, if this investment in myself means I only trip and fall 50 times,
Mhm.
great, then it was worth it. So it was really just looking at what am I investing in? And I'm investing in knowledge, access, and a community that would be able to support me.
Yeah, precisely. I think that there's this feeling of when somebody signs up for a mastermind that they're going to avoid all the mistakes. And it's like every parent makes that mistake, right? If I just tell my children enough, they'll be able to avoid the same mistakes
Right.
that I made in my life. And then the kids go out and they just make the same mistakes. And you realize it's not, the point is not to avoid all mistakes. What you just captured there, like instead of following 100 times, you're going to fall 50 times. So you recognize you're still going to have learning experiences that you learn on your own time, that there's no education that can prepare you fully everything that's going to happen out there because each deal, each thing can be so different, right? And just being able to recognize like the difference between how many times I fall by myself versus with this community around me should at least pay for how much I spent for the education. Like how much money I saved myself
Right.
to pay for that, but recognizing there still are pitfalls and lessons to be learned is really important. No matter what someone wants to do, whether they want to be active or passive, is a massive skill to get the people around you and the education around you that you need. So tell me about how you decide when you're going to do something actively or passively and where your money's going to go. Because you mentioned at the beginning that a 50% down payment would be needed to get cash flow on this particular house that you were looking at. And for me, I think that's where a lot of single family rental people stop, where they're like, it'll cash flow if I just put enough money into it. But then they don't learn how to run numbers. What's the ROI on that? Could you be
Right.
doing better in the stock market? Like having that much money tied up, could you be doing better elsewhere? So running your numbers and learning how to say, would this be a good place to park some cash? What are the actual returns with the predicted appreciation on this house or whatever? Like people just don't ever learn how to do those ROI calculations, which you probably learned in a mastermind. But then you're like, okay, so how do I park some cash efficiently? Like I can park it in the market at 8 or 10%. I can put it in a hard money loan for 10 or 12%. I can buy my own rental house. I could probably do 30, 40, 50%. So how do you make those decisions about where your cash is going to go?
So I mentioned that I had invested in a couple of programs,
Mhm.
and two other mentorship programs that I invested in were a tax lien and deed mentorship program, because I saw that as a means to bring in a lot of capital at a quick rate if successful through the auction and able
Mhm.
to sell them quickly or wholesale them. And went down the path, did find some success. I was able to get a house at auction for a low price. I was able to get a vacant lot on the big island of Hawaii. Even through that, I also came across another program that was focused on commercial properties in the Midwest. And I decided, why not?
Yeah.
Let's do it. Interestingly enough, the owners of this company used to be my neighbors. And in
Mhm.
the 10 years that we had lost touch, I didn't realize how rapidly they had expanded from just doing it themselves, residential portfolio, to now having their own business and teaching this and having a commercial portfolio. So I had a conversation with the wife. We talked a lot about what the opportunity could look like. And she was really trying to understand my knowledge, like what I had learned in the last year through these programs that I invested in,
Mhm.
and decided like, hey, let's take this to the next step. Let's, get you connected with her husband. And he was the one who really sold me on the commercial properties. So for me, seeing the difference between investing in Hawaii, putting that 50% down for a house that was going to cash flow $300, or taking that same amount of money, putting it in a commercial property in Kansas that was going to cash flow thousands of dollars, it was a no brainer. I
Yeah.
said, I got to do this, and invested in myself, looked at that price point and understood that I was going to get weekly trainings. I was going to get one on one calls. I was going to get access to all their previous recordings. We have dedicated realtors, they have a team on the ground, property inspectors, general contractors. Everything was there. How could I say no to this perfect little package that I just needed to invest my time, energy, and effort into to be successful in? So I did
Okay.
it.
What does that look like now? Because there are a lot of programs out there that kind of promise that we're gonna do all this stuff for you and we're gonna package it all up for you, and it just ends up being kinda like empty. And I hear a lot of frustration from investors thinking that there's some easy button to collecting everything and having that network and all that, and then they buy into something, and then 3 years later, they've never done a deal because it's not as easy button as they thought. They have to go out and find their own deals. And a lot of these coaching programs are ways to get your students to go find deals for you that then you might invest in if they bring you the best one. And so I
Right.
sometimes feel like a lot of people are let down by these, and we hear about people who are let down by them. So give us your experience in this one because it seems like it's one of the things that's working best in your portfolio right now.
It truly is. And I'll say in the 1 year that I have been a part of this program, I probably would have scaled faster had
Mhm.
I taken some advice on selling my townhouse, because I did a 1031 exchange on one of my properties here to purchase a commercial property. And had I done that, I probably would be a little further along. So kicking myself a little bit, but at the same time, realizing that I had this network, you have to show up first and
Mhm.
foremost. You have to show up and you have to engage, you have to take action, you have to ask the questions. I am the first to admit I don't know everything. I'm not the smartest one in the room. And here's again these individuals that I'm paying for or I'm investing in their knowledge. So ask the question. And this community in particular, the WNN community, I found that they were very open. There was no negativity, there was no shaming, there was no, oh, shouldn't you know that because you were a part of this program or that program? It was just open arms. And what are your questions? How can we help you? What issue do you need us to help you navigate through? So, that initial interview, if you will, they were interviewing me, but I was also interviewing them because I wanted to know, is this going to be like one of the other programs that I invested in? where I still have access to my mentor and he's
Mhm.
great, but they don't have the team on the ground. He also has a bunch of new students that are getting onboarded week after week. So that access is a little bit less every time. And monthly calls versus weekly calls, what's available online for me to access, where I can be driving the kids somewhere and I'm listening to whatever recording they had on whatever topic it was. And that would help me be prepared for the next session that was coming up. Because I would
Mhm.
look for something that said stabilization. So I just start listening to all the stabilization calls so I can just hear what they're talking about and then through that formulate my own question. So in that sense, what should you look for? In my opinion, it would be what are you investing in and what does that access grant you? And are you going to take action with that? Knowing, am I going to go into this program so I can cold call people and try to find the deal and then bring it to the table and see if they're going to fund it? Or is this a program where they're going to present, here's all these opportunities for you. You need to analyze them. We can talk about it together, but at the end of the day, you own it. That's the biggest thing. So you got to do your research up front as well. And the more it sounds easy, I think the more I would spend some extra time on understanding why it's so easy. Because
Mm.
truly, the easiest thing should just be a passive investor. If you just want to, you have $20,000 to just burn in a hole in your pocket and you want the easy button, let me know. I can
Yeah.
make it easy for you.
Oh, yeah. It's 'cause so your same attitude with investing. There's risk in everything, and you're gonna carefully use due diligence to try and make the best decisions you can, but you've probably invested in a couple of programs where you're like, "Eh, I wish I hadn't bought that one." It's going in that some of them are gonna be winners and some of them are gonna be like, "Eh." And that doesn't mean that everybody who buys that program wouldn't like it. It's just sometimes
Right.
you gotta date a little to figure out, like, what's a good fit for you, your personality, your level of work you wanna put into it. Because I meet passive investors all the time who think that just getting through our portal and reading our docs and signing it and then having to hook their bank account up, oh, it's just they never get around to it. It's too
Right.
much work. And then they'll be like, "Oh, I bought a mentorship program." I'm like, "You're not gonna
You
do
did what?
it." I'm
You're
like,
going to do with that.
let me know in a few months if you actually, like you said, showed up." That thing, and it's really interesting because sometimes the program will actually light them on fire and they'll get really excited about it and they do show up and they do start doing deals and they love it. And so you just really never know how something is gonna turn out, but it definitely a process. I do agree, probably the easier they make it sound, maybe the less trustworthy it is. But what you're looking for, not so much easy, you're looking more for systems. And I think that's the same thing you should look for in a company that you want to passively invest with. How systems driven are they that they can handle whatever kind of comes up? It's not that there are going to be no problems, it's just how are they going to manage their problems? So that the systems driven is very important, not the easy part.
And the fact that they interviewed me. They weren't coming to the table and just trying to sell me on it, and I think that was a big indicator as well. Is
Mhm.
one of the programs that I had gone through, they said, "Hey, pay this amount and then come to our 3-day program." And in the 3-day program, day 2, it was trying to sell you on the bigger package. So
Yes.
that was like the hook. You paid the $1,000, now they want you to pay the $40,000.
Yes.
So that was a flag, if you will, that raised pretty quick versus the program that I did invest in with the commercial properties. It was, this is a two-way street. You have to be engaging, you have to be involved. If you don't show up, you're not going to be successful. I'm not going to find deals for you and you just fund them. If you want to do that, then let's talk strictly passive investing. Don't spend your money on this mentorship program. We want people who are active. I am active
Yeah.
every day. I put in the work and I am using every single penny that I spent to move myself forward.
Yeah, get the value out of that. Well, I think that there's an important point that we haven't really talked about yet with passive investing versus active investing is that you are an accredited investor. People have to be accredited in order to invest in our fund. The way that the legal structure that we've chosen has accredited investors only. But I think the way we became accredited was our rental houses, right? Because you have equity in those rental houses. And so for me, even though we had some cash, it wasn't enough to be accredited, so we took that cash from a house that we sold, actually, like our personal home. Then we went and we split that up across multiple homes, and then we were able to split that into a couple of apartment buildings as, like, a small portion of our ownership, our GP. stake in that. I found the deal, I put in a little bit of money, and then we raised the rest. So that increased my net worth pretty quickly that we became accredited investors, but it wasn't from passive investing, it was from rental houses. So can you speak to me about if somebody's out there listening and they're not accredited, but maybe they make good money, but they're just not quite there yet. How did you get to that threshold so that you could start having a wider access to passive deals? Because you don't need to be accredited by a rental house, but you do need to be accredited to invest in a fund.
Yeah. So my husband, he is retired military
Okay.
and he has his retirement, he has his federal position and my position. So between those three sources of income, that's how we were able to get accredited.
So there's a net worth way to become accredited. $1 million,
Yes.
dollars, not counting your personal home.
Right.
Or if one person is making $200,000 on their own, or if the two together are making 300,000. So you could have a married couple where, say, one makes 200, but the other's a stay-at-home parent. Just the one who's making the 200 would still be accredited, and the other stay-at-home parent could still invest alongside because they live in the same household. But you'd be basically be doing the investments in the one person's name who's accredited on
Right.
that. And so I think that's a common misunderstanding that people have on the income side is that if one is making 200 and the other's making 50 or nothing, they're like, "Oh, we're not accredited," because they think the 2 together have to make 300. But the 2 together making 300 is just a way to say both of you are making 150, you're still accredited.
Right.
So it's important to understand, like, that 200 is the minimum for one person, and then 300 is the minimum for 2 people. And so that income side allowed you to become accredited on that alone. That's 2 years of tax returns that you have to show. But there's some other ways you can show that income too, because what if you're a business owner, I know that you write everything off. And so there it's not just the AGI on that box. There are other things that you can show for income as well, like rental income, things like that. So people sometimes have to get a little bit creative on that side if they're entrepreneurs, but just talk to your CPA and see if that's which path is going to work for you. So our path was net worth and your path was income. And so it's important to show like how important that is. When did you realize what an accredited investor was and that you might be one?
So listening to Zasha, she was promoting
Oh,
Rise
really?
Capital. Yeah.
Okay.
And just trying to understand, oh, what does that mean? Is that something that I can be a part of? And I went with it, did my research. Google is amazing. Just Google it. What's an accredited investor? How do I become one? And realizing that we had it, I just needed to talk to my husband, propose what this opportunity meant, and we were able to get it. It was a super simple process, actually. I'm trying to think, it's been a few years, but
Mhm.
like you said, the last 2 years of tax returns, just uploaded it. And I want to say it was almost instantaneous. They reviewed it. They're like, you're a accredited investor. I took that email or whatever it was, uploaded it to Rise, and I was able to move forward.
Yeah, definitely. It can be pretty quick. I think people think there's like a test or something. When I first heard accredited, I'm like,
No.
where do I get the exam? So it's a little bit of a confusing name that they call it, but basically you just have to hit certain standards. And it's like I said, it's important in passive investing because if you want to be in a fund and if they accept unaccredited investors, they're not allowed to advertise. And so they're hard to find. And that's a word of mouth kind of thing. And if you're
Right.
unaccredited, it's like, you gotta know someone? Well, what unaccredited people know a lot of high net worth or
Right.
invest hives? I complain about that one. I think it's like a rich get richer kind of thing because the only people who can hear about it word of mouth, it's like you gotta have some rich friends. And lots of unaccredited investors who are doing well don't really have rich friends. They might be the first person in their family who's ever achieved a certain level of wealth and they don't know anybody. Accredited helps because you just have access to so many more deals, not only because they're advertising them, but you never have to ask, "Can I invest in this?" "Oh, darn it, I can't because 'cause I'm unaccredited." So getting into that really allows you to get into that multiple streams of income, which is something you mentioned as well. Talk to me about the multiple streams of income because we all know if we don't have passive income, we can never retire. Like, we have
Right.
to have passive income to ever retire. We'll get into retirement, like your definition of because a lot of people here retire and they just completely shut down. They're like, "I don't ever wanna retire and lose my purpose and decay the way my dad did or my grandpa did." So tell me about that process of multiple streams of income, and then we'll talk about what retirement means and why you want those multiple streams of passive income. Otherwise, you have to work for your money.
So my husband has worked himself to the point that he has multiple streams of income. So he
Mhm.
did 30 years in the army. Now he's 1 year away from doing 10 years in the federal government.
Nice.
So both of those result in an annuity. He also has Social Security that will be available to him in a couple of years. So he's sitting back and saying, I'm going to have multiple streams of income and then I can retire.
Yeah.
And seeing that the streams of income are what they are because they are annuities and Social Security, depending on when he applies for it. But he has this level of comfort of, I've worked towards this. The difference is he's in his 60s.
Mm.
So he has worked 80% of his life
Yep.
to get this, to get to that point, and still feeling like I still have to work another couple of years in order to get this annuity that's only going to make me X amount of dollars.
Mhm.
So it's good. And I'm proud of him and he's definitely earned it. But do I want to work until actual retirement age? We have two young kids. They're going to be teenagers this year. We
Mhm.
have two grandbabies on the way from
Wow.
our older sons, and one's in North Carolina, one's in Hawaii now, but he's in the Coast Guard. So he could be moving around in the next couple of years. And what I'm looking for is that freedom. So
Mhm.
when I looked at my retirement calculator for the federal government and saw, oh, when you retire in 12 years,
Well,
this is how much money you're going to make. And that's one stream of income. And that's just not going to do it
mm,
with inflation. It's just not going to do it. And again, going back to the residential portfolio, thinking, yep, we're going to buy these houses, we're going to have this mailbox money coming in, and realizing that the market here, good for the kids, good for generational wealth, but not good for mom who wants to enjoy the next half of my life when my husband is actually retired. So
I
that's the difference. Like I'm seeing him bringing in his multiple streams of income, and I need to bring in my own without working until I'm in my 60s.
yes. Okay, and that's an important my dad was 10 years older than my mom, so when he retired, 65, he had a Boeing what do you call it? A pension, right? And
Yeah.
plus he had his 401k plan because they switched tracks in the middle of his career, but my mom was not working, she's a stay-at-home, just entrepreneur doing her cottage businesses and things like that, and so they were able to start thinking ahead, he's gonna retire much older, they're gonna go on some adventures, and then my mom got cancer, and you cannot count on this kind of stuff. My brother had a job for maybe I'm oversharing here. He worked for a public entity and he was in a terrible accident and became disabled. And so he didn't get a pension. You can't plan on this kind of stuff, especially over the course of 12 years or
Right.
few years. It's like these things are not reliable. And as much as I hear people when they're like, I don't want to retire early, I don't want to lose my purpose. I'm looking at the opposite. My sister's husband died when he was 60 years old. And just suddenly, like one day, he's just not there anymore. And he didn't get to retire. My mom didn't get to retire. She died when she was 64. My brother's retired now, right? But he doesn't have his pension or any of that. And so you see these kinds of experiences, and it's not about retiring early and losing your purpose. It's about being able to handle whatever life throws at you. And like you said, when your husband is to the retirement age, like you want to be able to retire with him instead of working another 10 years, keeping on that. So to talk to me about retirement. You live in Hawaii. Beaches are probably like you're over it, right? And then you've got kids on the mainland, which I see is often an issue with Hawaii families because the kids will move to the mainland for economic reasons and you're in paradise, right? But your kids working so far away. So just the travel alone is astronomical. So talk to me about retirement, your retirement age, what retirement looks like for you and how it's not motivated by sitting on a beach the rest of your life because you already
Right.
kind of done that.
So I definitely want to start the day on the beach or in the water in some form. I love to surf. My dad was a surfer. That's what drew him here from Boston.
Okay.
So just being in the ocean, that's that reinvigorating force that just rejuvenates me and also takes me away from everything electronic. So
Yes.
instead of sitting down and just going down the rabbit hole and analyzing deals, I don't have any of that because I'm out in the water, watching the waves, watching the sets coming in, and getting my exercise in as well, because
Yep.
that's part of it. It's staying healthy.
Yep.
And that's trust me, that's a workout. Trying to get through some sets sometimes and
Yep.
it'll get you catching your breath there. But through retirement, I want to be more available to my children as they go through their teenage years. My husband and I learned a lot with the older boys
Hmm.
and just trying to figure a lot of things out. My husband was deployed a lot. It's a struggle, and we were blessed to have this second round of kids, if you will, to be
Mhm.
able to really pour into them and be more available to them and be available for whatever they want to do. They are super active. My daughter's in hula, Tahitian, and gymnastics, and she's asking to do other stuff. And my son is doing soccer. He played flag football at one point, karate. They're super active and driving around and going to different places and wanting to do performances and travel off island for competitions. That's time.
Mhm.
And it's not just time, but it's also money.
Yep.
So having that freedom, it's not about how much money can I make. It's about having the financial freedom to be able to do those types of things. And I don't think the older boys were colluding with each other. Hey, let's both have kids this year. But that's just how it worked. So I'm looking forward to that grandma phase that I can be available. And my daughter-in-law who's here on island while she's here, if I can be the babysitter and
Yeah.
have that flexibility and that availability, I want to do it because the time is precious. Like you mentioned earlier, you never know. So whatever I can do to spend more time with my children, spend time with my family. My dad passed away in May of 2023,
Oh,
and I'm sure like everybody thinks, I just wish I had more time. I wish I had spent one more weekend golfing with him. I wish I had spent more time waking up early, driving out to the beach and just walking the shoreline with him and just talking about nothing. Those are the moments that you really want to live for. So my mom's doing great. She's still really active, still moving around a lot, but I want to spend more time with her and I want to be available to her and to be around to just treasure all those moments because my dad, he passed fairly quickly. We saw like a steady decline. And then within a 2-week period, he was gone. There was no opportunity to say, hey, dad, let's do this one more time, or you just have to live in the moment. So I'm
yeah.
looking at where I am in my 40s, and I just want to live the next half of my life on my own terms.
Yeah. And I don't wanna have it come from a place of fear or a place of scarcity. Because my husband and I basically are working right now, right? Like, we're working with Rise
Right.
Capital so that we can help other families. We always say we wanna help a couple dozen families reach financial freedom. It's not a huge goal. It's a lifestyle business for us. It keeps us busy, active, engaged, thinking a little bit stressed out, right? Because
Yeah.
that's important for
Always.
growth, obligations, and accountability that to live up to the things that we said we would do. And I think that even, like, we're looking at certain seasonal jobs to be able to go, I don't know, it just sounds fun to be able to go and do some either volunteer work. My in-laws lived at a camp for 2 years just maintaining the facilities on a volunteer basis.
It's fun.
And we actually went up to go stay at the camp. They had, like, family reunion week where there were no campers there. It was just people could bring their families up. And then we had camp, right, with grandma and grandpa at their camp. And so watching them do those kinds of things has really given us the opportunity to say, what if we could just do that, but younger, right? We
Right.
don't have to work anymore. We're choosing to work. And I think that's the biggest difference because then you can have multiple streams of income, active and passive. And your story really highlights how to do that thoughtfully, how to do that well. I think people get so caught up in not being able to give up control on their passive investments. So, can you tell me a little bit about that? Because I hear from active real estate investors most often two things. One, my money's all tied up in my own deals. And two, I don't think I can give up control. So, how do you handle those two things so that you can have this retirement that you're describing? Like, how do you get over the control of needing and then also every time you see a good deal, "Oh, I wish I had some more money to throw in that, but it's over here working passively, and, maybe I should have saved it so I could do my own deal." I hear this a lot.
So for myself, I think the biggest thing is having that goal in mind. So I have a number of how much passive income I need to bring in from the commercial and the residential properties in order to be free. And then
Mhm.
anything else outside of that is going to be what I use to invest passively. Because if I don't want to be hunting for that next deal, if I don't want to be analyzing deals, if I don't want to be going through a 212 itemed list of residential properties on a tax auction, which is what I was doing this past weekend,
Yeah.
I don't have to because my money is invested in multiple different methods.
Yeah.
So on the passive side, my goal is to be a full-time passive investor. And if I have to do active investing, it's going to be as needed. So
Mhm.
if you look over the portfolio and you realize, hey, this one, the leases are up. Maybe it's time to sell it. We can roll that into something bigger that's going to make more money. That will require that active side and for me to focus that time, energy, and effort into it. But also knowing that if I don't want to, I don't have to. As
Yeah.
long as the property is performing, do I need to? And that, again, that freedom to be able to make that own decision on the things that I want to focus on at that moment is really key. So it's understanding or where do you need to get, or what is that magical number in your mind that you think, as long as I'm making this much money a month, I'm good. And then the rest of the stuff, it'll depend. It'll depend on the season, it'll depend on what's happening. But for me, it's trying to get more and more to that passive investing side. So I only have to be active when I want to be active.
Exactly. And I think that's a danger of maybe retiring too late, especially my dad from a W-2 is a good example. Retired at 65, but was never an entrepreneur, was never an active investor. And so he used to be like, oh, all that stuff I wanted to do, like golfing or woodworking or whatever, I'm too tired to do it now. And so his
Right.
hobbies were not enough to keep him up and motivated. Even though I thought he was very active, right? I think maybe he was a little hard on himself for that, but it's just you're too late and you're not developing those skills of managing a portfolio or managing a business. And you don't really retire to anything. And so really you have to think about what am I retiring to here? Even your family, I want to be grandma or grandpa or whatever. I don't even think that's quite enough because they have parents who do most of it, hopefully. And so I have seen people decline in retirement. So it is really important to plan ahead, like you're talking about, and have these kinds of projects that you can work on as needed when it's interesting, fun, or if you just want some extra money because you have something in mind that you don't have to save up for, you can actually go out and just earn more to do the thing. For me, I have a goal to have $2 million dollars in cash invested in private loans. That's my goal. And then live off
That's
10,
awesome.
12% of
Yeah.
that. That's a pretty good lifestyle, and then after that, we'll just work to continue to build that thing. Another goal, because they come in stages, right? First was like, how do we just pay our bills, right? So we're
Right.
not having to be working. We don't have to work, but if we want to grow it, we want to grow it to that 2 million in private loans specifically, and then grow that to become a family office where we have a family bank and advisors, and we manage our portfolio as a unit. Used to be $100 million net worth, family net worth to do that, and I'm seeing that price come down with technology aiding that, but that's our next goal, and those are the kind of things that keep us excited to be able to keep learning, growing, and doing things because once you start hanging out with really wealthy people, you're like, "Okay, there's always someone better."
Right.
And it's not just money, but they're always somebody, like, volunteering more, making a bigger impact or whatever, and it's not a competition, it's inspiring to be like, "Yeah, there's no purpose to lose. Look at all these purposes. Just go find one."
Right.
Yeah. I ask everybody who comes on the show to describe like the perfect person who would reach out to you from the audience after the show, something that you would want to connect with. Can you describe that person?
So I think it's someone who's feeling like they can do more or they're capable of more. They just don't know where to start and they just need that little push. Someone that they're interested, they've done some research, they dabble in it a little bit and taken the first couple of steps and then run into whatever that roadblock is. And they feel like, oh, if I just had more information or if I could just get my husband on board or if I had more time. It's really someone who's excited, they're open-minded, they're unafraid to ask questions. That's the biggest thing because you can't feel like I have to show up knowing everything. You're never going to know everything. That's just a fact. So you have to be just open and be able to talk it out and bring the problem to the table and just ask like, how did you do it? Or what do you think? Or what would you recommend? And I think it's that person that's just really excited and curious. A curious mind is a great mind, but
Mhm.
also you need to hit a point that you make a decision,
Yeah.
whichever direction you're going to go. You don't have enough time? Okay, so what are you going to do? You've done all the research and you think you have what you need for this deal? Great, put in the offer. Just you need that push. I can push you. I can help you just make that decision and kind of focus on what direction you want to go in. But the biggest thing in all of that is you have to be motivated and be willing to take the next step and invest in yourself. Because without you just risking it all, you're going to stay stuck. You're going to be exactly where you were last year or a week ago, 6 months ago, and nothing's going to change. So just knowing that if you want to talk to someone who scaled quickly, who was able to find herself with my 5 year to retire goal, quickly shrinking down to a year and a half, let me
Yeah.
know. I'm your girl because I am moving so fast that sometimes but it's working. So why not?
Yeah, I love your approach. Think big, do big, and massive action, you understand, is a bunch of little teeny tiny steps day after day. It's a great lesson. And I have one last question for you before I do that.
Sure.
How do people get a hold of you? What's the best method of contact? And we'll put it up on the screen for those watching it on YouTube and down in the
Oh,
show
awesome.
notes.
So I'm active on Instagram. That's the one platform that I'm more consistent on. So my handle is LGREI808. And so you can find me on Instagram. I need to get better at getting onto the other platforms. So I will get to that point, but Instagram is the best way to do it.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, my Instagram's a little ignored. I'm more of a LinkedIn kind of person, but everybody seems to have their own preferred kind of platform. So the question that I asked way at the beginning, and I've been saving it for the end, is with Rise specifically, as your first passive investment and going through that process, what about getting onboarded and investing was easy? And what about it was hard? Both hard from your perspective, like maybe a mental block that you needed to overcome or freeing up money from another deal, but also hard from on our end, like processes and systems that we can improve to make investing more pleasant and as hands off and passive as possible.
So overall, I want to say I think you guys did a really good job and putting together a platform that has easy access. The investment opportunities were clearly laid out and it wasn't difficult to navigate. So I'm thinking back to something that I read about Apple and the first iPod, how
Mm,
many clicks to get to what you're trying to get to. So when I went into the portal, it's right there. All the information, it's easy to link to. I was able to wire the money pretty quickly. I think it was actually the time that it took to wire the money took more time than it did to get myself set up.
oh,
The hard part, and I think that's something that you really can't avoid because you are bound to provide all these disclosures and all this information and all this lawyer speak. That's a requirement. So, from an investor's perspective, I think it's just knowing that you have to take the time out to read through all the information and feel comfortable, or just as you do with other investments like Charles Schwab or the retirement, and you just click consent or I agree, hit the easy button and just trust that it's a solid company that you're investing in.
yeah, definitely. I think with private companies, you do have to be, I think, more careful just because public companies have like the frequent net asset valuation, they've got asset tests, they've gone on the roadshow of regulations and adherence, which is why even a teenager can open a Robinhood account and throw some money at
Right.
it. And so it is important, like you said, going in to understand like there's just more on the front end of education, paperwork, and then you're gonna have different portals. I don't know, you're probably not finding that yet, right? Because you can just keep recycling money in the same deals, like different property, but the same type of deal in the same portal over and over again. And so you don't have to keep submitting an accredited investor letter. You get 1K1 at the end of the year, no matter how many different deals you did. But eventually, when you get more into private markets, it's like everybody's got their own portal, there's their own login. It can turn into a little bit of a organizational nightmare. And there are a lot of tech founders out there who are trying to come up with good solutions to this problem. But it's just one thing that I think, like you mentioned, you just kind of have to expect like this is going to take a little bit more on the management side than maybe the public market investors are used to seeing. I know
Right.
certainly for me, it's sucked me in and became a cold career change for me. So it's definitely there's a lot there. Anything that we could do to improve the experience for the investors, especially now in the follow-up, not necessarily the onboarding, but now like the communication and the follow-up, because I don't feel like the systems there are as robust as they could be.
When you think through what more would I need to feel more comfortable, I think there's been enough engagement through newsletters or just like a follow up quarterly update on where we're at. And to be fair, a lot of these emails, they go unread for a certain period of time. So it's hard to find that balance of that constant communication because communication is good, absolutely, because you don't want it to get to the point where you're like, oh, I wonder what's going on. But in this case, I can go, oh, where's that email that I really need to go read right now? So maybe the active side on social media, more of a just a blip on what's going on. But again, depending on which platform you're on, that's really hard to gauge. Is that going to meet the needs of all of your investors? So I think you guys have your work cut out for you, to be honest.
Yeah. I did hear, I don't know where I heard this from, but that marketing or advertising specifically is more about making your existing customers feel good about what they bought than it is about converting new customers. Because then those
Yeah,
satisfied customers, when they see like a Coca Cola commercial and they're like, wow, I'm proud to be drinking Coca Cola. And then somebody else is going to see it and it goes from there. So it's more about getting referrals than it is about getting new business. So it's interesting that you say that because I've never really thought about reporting on publicly on social media like that so that our current investors would see it and then feel good about like, what they invested in essentially. So that's an interesting food for thought. I appreciate you taking the time to hang out and answer questions and talk
yeah,
to listeners and give me some feedback. That's how we all get better and grow. And the kind of person you want to reach out, that's exactly like the kind of person that I like to reach out to me as well, because it's like the community and the network that we're creating of education and accountability is really key to being successful with anything that you do. And I love your can do attitude. That's whatever this takes, we're going to get through it. We're going to win some, we're going to lose some. Hopefully, we win a lot more than we lose, and we'll
right.
end up where you want to be. So it's a really inspiring story. And I'm really glad to be doing business with you.
Oh, thank you so much.
All right. If you want to get a hold of me, investwithemma.com. If you want to get a hold of Lehua, that would be LGREI, stands for Real Estate Investing 808 on Instagram. And we would love to hear more from you about what you're planning so that we can help you go on more passive income adventures. I'll see you next week.